I gathered evidence of my father's affair to force him to leave with nothing. In court, my mother refused the child, and I was awarded to my father. Later, my father remarried, and the two of them tormented me every day. One day, my stepmother brought her lover into the house, beat me until I was barely alive, and threw me into the kitchen like a dead dog. The kitchen door slammed shut. Through the searing pain I forced myself to turn on the gas, and I took out the phone I'd hidden in the kitchen and called my father home. This was my last chance for him. Dad came back, but sadly he didn't seize the chance. He didn't fight the traitor, didn't turn on my stepmother, and he certainly didn't try to save me. Instead, he and my stepmother played a honey trap, and they ruthlessly blackmailed the traitor. Hearing the three of them bargaining in the living room, I, in despair, set the fire. As the flames flared and with a boom, the three of them in the living room and I all took our boxed lunches together. When I opened my eyes again, my mother was standing in front of me, her face cold as she asked, "Lily, did you really see it?" I realized I had been reborn, back to the day I first discovered my father's affair. The first thing I did was tell my mother. I wanted her to deal with Dad properly. I rubbed my eyes and said to her, "Maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me. I've been a bit blurry lately." My mother took me to the optician. I was nearsighted by 2 diopters. She glared at me as she picked out a pair of glasses, telling me to put them on and be sure I could see clearly before I spoke. I turned my head and saw Dad holding that woman's hand while buying something across the way. Thinking of everything that happened in my previous life, I grabbed Mom and began choosing frames. In truth, I had already set my heart on a particular pair, but I didn't want to leave so soon. I couldn't let Mom see Dad. In my last life I gathered a lot of evidence for Mom, doing everything I could to push my parents toward divorce and make Dad leave with nothing. In the end, Mom didn't want me as a burden at all. The court forcibly awarded me to Dad. So this time I don't want my parents to divorce. At least until I'm able to support myself. I don't want them to split. At night, Mom finished cooking and sat with me at the table, waiting for Dad to come home for dinner. She nervously rubbed her calloused hands, and every so often, half asked, half complained, "Why are you still not back so late?" Mom, just in her early 30s, already had a few threads of white at her temples. She must have loved Dad terribly, keeping the household for him, bearing and raising me, tending to my ill grandparents, looking after my uncle and aunt. Now that Grandpa and Grandma were gone, and my uncle and aunt had started families of their own, and I was away at boarding school for junior high, she finally felt much lighter and wanted to give Dad another child. But Dad had an affair. In my previous life, I stood up for Mom, resenting Dad for being cold and unfeeling. When I learned the woman he cheated with was Helen, Claire's mother, I teamed up with her to gather a lot of evidence. Like Claire, I egged my parents toward divorce, wanting the betrayer to walk away with nothing and receive the punishment he deserved. In the end, Claire's parents divorced. She went with her father, and I heard she was doing quite well. When my mother divorced, she didn't take me. She disappeared with all the assets and there was no trace. My father married Helen. They knew it was Claire and me who gathered the evidence to force them out with nothing, and they spent their days targeting me. In the end, in their rented apartment, I chose to perish along with them. When I died in my previous life, I was only 16. Dad came home very late, a bright red lipstick stain on his white shirt. Mom's brow was slightly furrowed, but she still smiled and called him to eat. Even though it was already summer, Mom insisted on reheating the dishes. Dad and Mom sat side by side. I sat in the spot farthest from them. Dad's cologne smelled strong, almost stifling. But Mom, sitting next to him, behaved as if she had noticed nothing, smiling as she served him food. At this point, what could I not understand? My mother is the kind of person who can smell what I ate at school from a fart. How could she not notice? She kept pretending to sleep, immersed in the dream she had woven for herself, wanting nothing more than to stay by Dad's side and ignore everything else. In my past life, I had ripped that dream apart and forced her awake. This time, I wouldn't do that. I warned myself silently, don't try to wake someone who's pretending to sleep. Otherwise you can't handle the terrible morning temper that will come down on you. I ate a little at random, then left the table to wash up and go to bed. I couldn't stand their mutual display of affection, nor could I tolerate the overpowering, rank smell coming from my father. On Sunday evening I returned to school. The scent of osmanthus in the air brought me to tears of joy. I had finally come back. In my previous life, after my parents divorced, my father used not being able to pay the boarding fee as an excuse to make me a day student. But the rental was too far from the school, and he wouldn't give me bus fare. I was forced to drop out, spending my days doing housework and serving my stepmother. They would beat or yell at me at the slightest disagreement, blaming me for all their misfortunes. Reborn into this life, I will definitely study hard. During evening study, Claire came. She's a day student, her home is near the school. She looked terrible, as if she had just been crying. Just like in my previous life, she switched seats with my deskmate and sat next to me to pour out her troubles. She suspects her mother is seeing someone else, always dressing up gaudily, not cooking on time, forcing her to do all the housework, and often beating and scolding her when the meals aren't good enough. I didn't propose, as I had in my past life. I'll tail her mother while she tails my father. Instead, I calmly told her that we are students now, that studying is most important, and not to meddle in adults' affairs. As long as our grades are good, our lives will naturally improve. Claire saw that I was only focused on studying and not helping her come up with schemes, so during the second study period she switched deskmates back and went to complain to others. I sighed, hoping she would understand that I had her best interests at heart. By the weekend, my mother still came to the school gate to pick me up. Her features had shifted subtly, she somehow looked a little younger. Maybe because she no longer had to care for so many people and only needed to look after herself, she began spending money on herself. She wore a light-colored dress and black high heels, clearly cheap at a glance, but they lent her a touch of womanliness. Before, she always said skirts and heels made it hard to walk. When her grandparents called her, she'd take ages to get there. Now, she didn't have to look after the elders or do so many chores. She said she wanted to be kinder to herself, so she had her hair highlighted, permed into big waves, and the silver at her temples disappeared. But that trendy hairstyle didn't seem to suit her waxy yellow cheeks. 10+ years of labor, poor nutrition, and irregular hours made her look like a woman in her 40s. She smiled as she took my school bag and asked how she looked with her new style. I choked out that she looked great, and without caring about the strange looks from classmates nearby, I grabbed her hand and pulled her back. She was love-struck. My father was her whole life. I shouldn't judge or interfere in their marriage with my own perspective. Compared to my stepmother and other mothers who favored sons, she really was much better. Even when my grandparents once scolded her for having a money-losing child and told her to have another, she never wavered. Instead, she firmly told them that if she got pregnant again there would be no one at home to take care of her. My grandparents were afraid that if she really had another child there would be no one to look after them, so they never pushed her again. Thus, she always had only me as her daughter and never treated me poorly in any way. On the bus ride back, she said my father might come home very late, so she bought me something to eat to tide me over. She bought a piece of cake and a carton of milk. She said she wasn't hungry and would wait for my father to come back. Even though she kept telling me to take care of myself, she was still careful with money. I felt bad for her too. I only ate half and left the rest for her, not like in the previous life when I sulked and ate it all. She loved Dad very much, and she loved me too, but her love was so humbled down into the soil. In my past life, I really looked down on someone like her, resenting that she would never amount to anything. But in this life, I tried to respect and understand her love. The time waiting for Dad to come home at the dinner table always felt especially long. Mom had already gotten used to it. She was like a little girl, quietly waiting, a smile lingering at the corner of her mouth. I stopped mocking her for being foolish and tried talking with her. Mom said that when she had just learned to crawl, Grandma passed away, Grandpa had to work, and both uncles had jobs too. No one took care of her. Every day at mealtime, they would sneak moments to bring her food, then go back to their own affairs. She was 3 and still couldn't speak, and didn't learn to walk until she was 8. But she said Grandpa and the uncles loved her, because many girls her age were treated as mere dependents from birth, raised only as long as it suited others. Although she had no one with her, everyone treated her like family. Grandfather was illiterate and named my mother Pearl. He said my mother was his treasure, the jewel of his palm. In my past life, when my mother said these things I would secretly mock her, calling her a real pig, so foolish. Now I feel a little sorry for her. My mother said that when she went on blind dates, she fell for my father at first sight. Everyone advised her not to marry into that family, because grandfather and grandmother were in poor health, my uncle and aunt needed to study, and if she married and she would have endless housework and unending suffering. She didn't mind at all. She said marrying my father made her happy, having family around was wonderful. Only if she died would they be apart. For my father she learned to wash, cook, and care for the household. Even when she was pregnant and confined after childbirth, she kept doing housework. Whenever she spoke of him, love always showed in her eyes and couldn't be hidden. When my father returned, she would go greet him with a smile and ask if he looked good, like a shy, blissful little woman. My father seemed in low spirits, disheveled, as if he'd just been badly beaten, but he still, against his feelings, said she looked good. Mom asked him, worried, whether he was all right, without asking at all what had happened. Dad said he had fallen accidentally. It wasn't a small matter. Mom told him to be more careful from now on and said she'd buy something tasty tomorrow to help him recuperate. That weekend, Dad was in an unusually good mood and took Mom and me out shopping. He bought Mom a few outfits that were passable. Mom smiled, the corners of her eyes curved, and she didn't stop grinning all day. On Sunday evening when Claire went to school, she was in a great mood. She told me that she and her dad had gone with some people to corner that scoundrel, beat him up soundly, and extracted a few thousand yuan from him. Her dad was in a good mood too. He even bought her a beautiful dress and gave her a few hundred in pocket money. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Later I decided I should be happy. Because by the weekend, when my mother came to pick me up, she looked radiant. She said that Dad hadn't been so busy these past few days, that he came home early every day and even helped her with the housework. It turned out to be the nourishment of love. Sure enough, at dinner, just as the dishes were set on the table, Dad came back. He had bought little gifts for Mom and me, saying that when his co-workers bought some, he followed suit and got one too. Mom was very happy, tears of joy welling in her eyes. I thought that this beating had been worth it. At least he was behaving much better, and it seemed like he genuinely cared about the family. Mom said she was bored at home, so I told her to go find something to do. Dad said he could provide for this family. Mom just needed to stay home and focus on getting pregnant. In my previous life he was out of work not long after, then he never recovered. If Mom stopped working and actually got pregnant, what would we do then? Maybe my thoughts are selfish, but I'm clear that if my mom really got pregnant and Dad lost his job, I might end up just like last time, dropping out of school to take care of Mom at home. Reborn, I know Dad loves the women outside the home the most, and Mom loves Dad the most. If I don't plan and fight for myself, no one will do it for me. On Sunday afternoon, Mom drove me back to school, and I saw the stepmother from my past life, Helen, again. She changed to another man, the same seducer who beat me in my past life. I don't know his name. I hope she never provokes Dad again. By the end of term my grades had improved a lot. Claire's, by contrast, hovered in the middle. Sometimes I urged her to put her energy into studying, but she wouldn't listen at all. She stopped talking to me about her family and began seeing punk boys from the neighborhood. The teachers had talked to her several times, but it was useless. The teachers even took me aside and told me to stay away from Claire. During the winter break, the most terrifying thing happened. My mom got pregnant. My mind was in turmoil. In my previous life, at this time my parents had already divorced. At the end of the year my father lost his job, and that year I was beaten many times. Several times I thought about drugging my mother, but she had such high hopes for the baby in her womb. She said whether it was a brother or a sister, the child would be just like me, the fruit of her and my father's love. In the end I still did nothing. A few days before Lunar New Year's Eve, Dad came home in high spirits. saying his boss had raised his salary and given a hefty year-end bonus. He said their boss liked employees with harmonious families, and upon hearing that Mom was pregnant with a second child, he gave a little extra. No wonder in my previous life he lost his job. My uncle's family also said they'd come back for the new year. Mom rushed around tidying up. I felt sorry for her, so I had to put down my homework and help her. My aunt said she was on vacation too and that her whole family would come help us clean. In my previous life, after my parents divorced, my uncle and aunt cut ties with my father. I heard it was because I pushed for the divorce, and they took it out on me. When I was abused, no one stood up for me. This year is the liveliest year I've had in both my lives. My uncle and aunt bought my mother beautiful clothes and brought me lots of gifts. My aunt is pregnant too. Her belly is about the same size as my mom's. She works within the system, and my mother said that once she has the baby, she'll have it live with us so we can help raise it. I find it terrifying. Why does my mother like suffering so much that she looks for trouble for herself? I really can't understand it. My uncle and aunt gave me quite a lot of New Year's money. My mother didn't take it. She told me to keep it myself, saying I'm grown up now and need to learn to manage my own money. Mom and Dad also gave me a big red envelope. I hid it all away carefully. If someday Dad loses his job, I'll rely on it to go to school. At the start of the new term, Claire dressed like a fallen girl. The teacher was furious. If it weren't for compulsory education, she probably would have been expelled. The teacher said the school introduced a new incentive policy. If you score well, you get cash rewards. If ninth graders apply to this school's high school and perform well, they can be exempted from all fees. In my past life the teacher mentioned this too, but my father and stepmother didn't even give me the chance of junior high. How could I possibly have an opportunity? In this life my parents aren't divorced, so at least I can still live at school for now. After that, I worked harder than ever. I'm not the kind of student who's particularly clever. I can only rely on my own effort. My uncle sent me some study materials. During the new year, he didn't say it outright, but I understood. He thought my grades were just barely enough to get into high school, and getting into university would be difficult. Before long, my father really did face unemployment. The company was doing poorly and the boss couldn't keep it going. My father, grateful for the big red envelope the boss had given him at New Year, volunteered to transfer to the sales department. There was no salary at all, and he even had to pay out of pocket for living expenses. There were some savings at home, but not much. My aunt moved in with us and my mother helped look after her pregnancy. I knew this was my uncle's indirect way of supporting our family, but seeing my mother, with her big belly, going to take care of my aunt made my heart ache. My aunt, Dad's sister, would come help at home when she was free, but she had to work, so she could only offer some financial support. My mother and my uncle both had the baby. Despite the family's difficulties, my uncle and aunt pooled money to send my aunt-in-law and mom to a postpartum care center. Dad got even busier. This time he was truly swamped, busy with client meetings, spending weekends on the phone handling work for clients. When Mom finished her stay at the postpartum center, being frugal, she went back to acting as the housekeeper for my aunt-in-law and the two children. She said it was my aunt-in-law's first time having a baby, and she needed at least 45 days of care. But what about her? She's an older expectant mother. I couldn't understand her thinking. All I could do was quietly accept it. The second spring festival after my rebirth was even livelier. Not to mention the two wailing little brothers, my aunt's belly had grown big again. At the New Year's Eve dinner, I heard my mother say that after the holiday my aunt-in-law would go back to work, so she'd stay home to look after the two kids, and my aunt would come to our house to help take care of them. Sure enough, if she wanted to suffer, there was no end to the suffering she could find. No one cared about my studies. They were all talking about my adorable little brother, so nobody knew that I had topped the class and won a scholarship of several thousand yuan. That year our family was in dire straits. Dad didn't earn a penny. We lived off allowances from my uncle and aunt, so my red envelope was very small. Everyone gave only a symbolic few hundred, a world of difference from last year. Luckily, after the holiday, Mom and Dad still managed to scrape together my tuition and living expenses. This was the last semester of ninth grade, the time that would decide my fate, and I worked even harder. And Claire skipped class from time to time. I heard from classmates that something had happened at her home, and then she and some street toughs beat someone up, but she was underage, so nothing came of it. I guessed she must have beaten Helen, because I knew well how much she hated Helen. But by not studying properly and wasting her days, wasn't she just turning herself into the next Helen? After junior high graduation, I enrolled in the high school attached to our school, because the teachers said tuition and living expenses would be completely waived. Of course there was a condition: I had to maintain a certain rank. I had just finished the middle school entrance exams when my young aunt gave birth. My mother brought her to our home to take care of her, and it just so happened I had no summer homework, so I could help. I was on the verge of tears. I was so afraid they'd get used to me taking care of things and not let me go to high school. Every morning when I opened my eyes, I went with my mother to look after my little brother, buying groceries, cooking, tidying the house, taking him out for walks. My mother said that when I get married I'll have to take care of children too, so I'd better start learning early. I was terrified. Could she be thinking I should drop out of school, be set up to marry early and have dowry come in? Fortunately, Dad's company finally took a turn for the better, and he went from being an employee to becoming the boss. He took over the company from his former employer, and with the help of my uncle and my father-in-law, he secured a large, long-term client. I no longer had to worry about my tuition. The first thing Dad did after earning money was hire a nanny to help Mom take care of the children at home. When they learned I had applied to stay at my own school for high school, both Dad and my uncle felt a bit disappointed. It wasn't a top-tier high school. Still, they let me go. In the second semester of my sophomore year, we moved into a villa. My father had a dedicated driver, and on weekends he would drive to the school gate to pick me up. One day, I saw Claire again. Many classmates were leaning against the windows, watching Claire get married outside. She wore a bridal gown and climbed into the wedding car. Some said she was marrying one of the blonde boys. I saw Helen again, arm in arm with the very seducer from the past life. A classmate from the same neighborhood as Claire said that both of Claire's parents were having affairs and were in the middle of a divorce. But she was their only daughter, and to make the inheritance clean, they openly put a price on Claire and married her off, then split the bride price between themselves. I don't know how Claire's life ended in her previous life, but she always placed her hopes in others and was destined to be disappointed. The whole family favored my younger brother, but I didn't mind, as long as Mom and Dad let me continue my studies. When the college entrance exams were over, despite all my efforts, I only got into an ordinary undergraduate program. Dad no longer lacked money. He handed me a card that would cover my tuition and living expenses for 4 years, and even gave me a new model tablet. Fearing he'd change his mind, I immediately transferred the money into my own account. My younger uncle and aunt also gave me some money, which I carefully saved. All the children in the family had been sent to school. After a few years of good living, my mom wanted a third child again. I suspected she had a constitution that thrived on hardship. When I got my university acceptance letter, my dad held a celebration for my advancement. That day he brought a young, beautiful woman home to celebrate with me. The way the two of them acted made it obvious their relationship wasn't proper, but my mom, my aunt, and my uncle said nothing, and I understood without being told. A man like my dad will never change his womanizing ways. My mom said that no matter how many women my dad took outside, she would always be the legitimate wife. In ancient times those women would only be concubines or secondary wives. She loved him, so she had to accept him unconditionally. I really can't agree with her way of thinking. During the spring festival of my first year at university, I didn't go home because I had taken a part-time job. My dad said he didn't need that money, but I like working, so it was fine not to go back. Perhaps it was the indifference of Dad, my uncle, and my aunt in my previous life that left me with a lingering grudge. So after I started university, my immediate reaction to having freedom was to avoid going back whenever I could. My feelings for my mother are equally complicated. I love her, but she abandoned me in a past life, so in this life I only love myself. During the spring festival of my senior year, I went home. My mother was the one who asked me to come back. It turned out that my father had been set up and conned by that other woman. The house, the car, the company, everything was gone, and he was saddled with debt. My uncle and aunt urged my mother to divorce, so my father would be left to bear those debts alone. My mother absolutely refused to divorce, saying she was willing to shoulder those debts with my father. The more I thought about it, the more wrong it felt. I had my mother check my father's transfer records to get back the money paid to the other woman. I used my tablet to look through my father's chat history myself. If I hadn't checked, it would have been better. Once I did, I discovered that it was all staged by my father. The woman outside was pregnant. He wanted to divorce my mother and make her leave with nothing. My aunt and uncle on my father's side mostly knew about it too. All they could do was try to keep my mother from inheriting the debts. Anyway, I'm grown now, I can support my mother in the future. I was able to find out because when my dad gave me a tablet, I secretly linked it to his social account and backed up all his chat histories. Before, I only thought of it as leaving myself a fallback. I never imagined a day would come when I'd need it. Luckily, I majored in law in college, so I knew which information would be most useful to my mom and saved it all. I handed the evidence to my mom and said it had been discovered by a private investigator. I didn't dare tell her I'd found it myself. She wouldn't have believed me. She couldn't believe my father would treat her that way, nor that my uncle and aunt would stab her in the back. After all, she had sacrificed so much for them. In the end, my mother still divorced him. She produced the evidence, made my father leave with nothing, and recovered half of the assets he had spent on the other woman. Just like in the previous life, she didn't take my brother. On the day she received the divorce certificate, she transferred all the property to me and disappeared, just as she had before. My father remarried quickly. This time the stepmother wasn't Helen. The new stepmother bore him a daughter. Their life was hard. He had sold the company, the house, and the car before to make things look convincing. Now he was left with nothing and wanted to start another business. Totally impossible. He was getting on in years. Even if he wanted to go back to work, no one would hire him. Like in his previous life, he moved into a rental and wanted to tell me to drop out of school to come home to take care of my stepmother during her confinement and look after my younger siblings. But he forgot that I'm free now, long out of his control. And besides, I have money now. How could I possibly listen to him? My uncle and aunt cut off contact with him, just like in the previous life. He called me and told me to take my younger brother away, or he'd throw him out onto the street to fend for himself. I thought he was just talking. I never expected he would actually film himself driving my brother out the door, then film him begging on the street. He gave me 3 days. If I didn't come back, he'd sell my brother. I called the police. Because I read his chat history, as soon as I went back, they planned to set me up with an old man and squeeze him dry of his pension. The local police station found my younger brother and detained Dad. I went to the station in a state of trepidation. Under those circumstances, there was no way I could go to my father's rental, who knew what my stepmother might do to me. I took my brother away. At 8 he hadn't even started school and looked so thin and small. This was the child my mother, with her love-struck brain, had insisted on having no matter what. I brought him to another city and enrolled him in a nearby primary school with boarding. I won't raise a child and I don't want to. Not long after, the police contacted me again and said they had found a body that might be my mother, asking me to go identify it. The corpse no longer resembled her at all. Identification could only be made through DNA comparison. The test results came back. Indeed, it was my mother. After divorcing my father, she chose to take her own life. Perhaps in a previous life she, too, had found some lonely corner and ended herself. The day I collected my mother's ashes, I ran into Claire at the police station. She seemed unhinged. She recognized me and screamed, "Why didn't you help me? Why didn't you die?" The police said that during the new year she poisoned the food. Her parents, step-parents, parents-in-law, husband, and children were all killed by her poison. only she was rescued. The doctors diagnosed her as mentally ill, so she wasn't sentenced. But she stormed the police station every day, demanding to know why they had saved her, which gave them headaches. It turned out she, like me, had been reborn, but she made a different choice than I did, and in the end she went mad. I buried my mother in the cemetery closest to my father and sent the location to my father, my uncle, and my aunt. Every time I go to sweep the grave and ask the caretaker if anyone has come to see my mother, he always shakes his head. My mother had tirelessly raised my uncle and aunt and their children, and not a single one of them ever came to visit her. A few years later, my father died in a car accident. My stepmother took the compensation money and the kids and ran. The hospital contacted me to collect the ashes, saying my father's last wish was to be buried together with my mother. I thought my mother would have agreed, because she had spent 2 lifetimes with her whole heart fixed on that man. In her past life she had said she would never, like those flirtatious women, wear skirts, paint her lips, or curl her hair into big waves to lure men, nor would she try to keep a man by bearing him a son. But in this life she did everything for my father, she even bore a younger brother for him. With that kind of love-struck mind, no matter how many times she lived over, all she thought about was how to keep my father. Burying them together was, in a way, her fulfillment. I don't understand her love, but I choose to respect it. I'll have my brother raised at a boarding school, I'll make sure he eats his fill, is warmly clothed, and gets an education, but I feel no familial affection for him, only obligation. I can't accept the way my mother's partner loves, I'll only love myself in my own way. That means loving no one but myself, only then will I avoid getting hurt.